Should suicide rates determine the treatment of transgender identifying people? The medical and social treatment of people who identify as transgender raises at least two important questions for societies to answer. Number one, how do we want to be treated when we have false beliefs about ourselves? Number two, should we create an incentive for social and political groups to practice self-hostage taking, where an individual threatens their own life or well-being in order to exert pressure, gain attention, avoid consequences, or achieve certain demands? Let's start with the first question. All of us will have false beliefs about ourselves at some point, with the extent of the consequences depending on the importance of the belief. For example, if I thought I was sober when I was actually drunk, the consequences could be deadly, as decisions made consistent with that belief could get me or others killed in a car wreck. Surely no one in their right mind would argue for affirming that false belief. How about another? Imagine I believed my labor was worth more than it actually was, and no one around me corrected me. Consequently, I end up permanently unemployed, since I keep holding out for an employer to offer me what I think I'm really worth. I could go on, but you get the point. As Proverbs 27 verse 6 says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy." Still, what's the harm in affirming trans identities? Sure, we wouldn't want people to drive drunk or remain permanently unemployed, but where's the harm in calling a man she, buying him a bra for Christmas, and or letting him get an orchiectomy accompanied by a vaginoplasty? The harm is self-evident, but if you're still unsure, here are just some of the many harms of treating a man as a woman. Number one, an orchiectomy leaves a man infertile, thereby reducing his biological fitness, which depends on survival and reproduction. Number two, there is a right way to be a man, and it doesn't include acting as a woman. It's easy to be egalitarian in a time of peace, but we all recognize the prima facie dereliction of duty that would take place if a husband asked his wife to go break up a fight rather than doing it himself. Number three, social trust is degraded when people's false views of themselves are unconditionally affirmed rather than lovingly corrected. In other words, if I can't trust you to correct my false beliefs about my gender, how can I trust you to correct my false beliefs about my sobriety, intelligence, dating prospects, etc.? Number four, use of preferred pronouns in reporting misleads the public about differences between the sexes, such as differences in crime rates, physiology, and athletic achievements. In short, we are all better off when we can rely on those around us to tell us the truth about ourselves and others. Likewise, we best serve those around us by lovingly correcting their false beliefs and communicating honestly. Now, on to question two. Should we create an incentive for social and political groups to practice self-hostage taking? If asked this question outside the topic of transgenderism, I imagine most people would unequivocally answer no. However, basing medical and social treatment of trans-identifying people on their suicide rates does just that. For example, assume some data showed lower suicide rates among adults who desired and received orchiectomy and vaginoplasty compared to those who desired these procedures but were denied them. Even with such data, we couldn't rule out self-hostage taking as the explanation for higher suicide rates in the group denied the procedures. Even if the participants did not know they were going to be in a study, they may still reason, based on the rhetoric of some politicians, doctors, pundits, and members of the public, that killing themselves when they are not affirmed will advance their group's cause. While this may seem like a massive leap to some, I don't think it is. Are we really to believe that an ideology that can convince someone to sacrifice their fertility couldn't also convince them to sacrifice their life? Moreover, if treatment is based upon suicidality, which would include unsuccessful suicide attempts and suicidal thoughts, then the sacrifice is obviously lower, and the individual would still be around to reap the rewards, from their perspective, of a more trans-affirming society. One objection among many I expect to hear is that if we approve treatments that reduce suicide in patients with depression, then why wouldn't we approve medical treatments for trans-identifying patients if they similarly reduce suicide mortality? The obvious answer is that while you can do blind control trials for drugs that treat depression, you cannot do the same for puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, gender reassignment surgeries, or for social affirmation, since in every case, the person will know whether they are in the control or the treatment group. I believe this answer is sufficient on its own, though it's obviously non-exhaustive given the plethora of medical complications associated with the hormonal and surgical interventions given to some trans-identifying people. If you're still not seeing the problem with basing medical and social treatment on group suicide rates, imagine this. Some whites who identify as black start getting pissed that society disapproves of their use of the N-word, and they start threatening to kill themselves unless they get the N-word pass. Would that be justification for letting them say the N-word? For now, you say no, but what about if the bodies start piling up? What then? You don't want to be responsible for someone else's suicide, do you? Would you rather have a dead white friend or a living black friend? I hear race and gender are both just social constructs, so what gives? So you might concede and let whites start wearing blackface and using the N-word. But what if anorexics start killing themselves to secure liposuction for their friends? What then? Do you let doctors take orders from customers the way waiters at a restaurant do? Doctor, what would you like today? Patient, I'd like my legs amputated because it really gets me going sexually. Doctor, coming right up. Would you like anything else with that? Conclusion. Suicide is a tragedy and no one wants anyone to take their own life. Yet if in our discourse we tell people that we will reward their group so long as the death count is high enough, what can we expect other than more deaths? Indeed, how can we expect other social groups not to adopt this strategy if it is proven successful?